The trade deadline is finally here. Trade. It's finally time for my trade deadline prediction video. Now, what we're going to do today, what this video is going to be, it's going to be me running through each and every team, figuring out their status. Are they buying? Are they selling? What's going on? Are they going to blow up their roster? Who's going to be available? And I'm going to predict some of the bigger trades. This video took an absurd amount of time of researching, trying to figure out the perfect trade for teams that are looking to upgrade their roster and teams that are looking to gain some assets. So if you guys enjoy it, please like the video, please share it, and you know what, leave a comment. Let me know what you guys think. Do you guys like the trades that I've proposed in this video? Do you guys disagree with them? What trades do you guys think are going to play out between now and February 9th? We're going to go over each and every team. I've split every team in the NBA into 4 different categories. We're going to go over each and every team, and then after that, I'm going to give you guys my trade predictions. I just want one right. Like, that's what I want. It's very, very difficult to try and pinpoint trades. Mock trades almost never seem to become reality. I just want to get one right. I'll feel very, very good about myself. I have 15 proposed trades here. Typically, there was 20 trades at the deadline last year, 23 trades in 2021. And when I say at the deadline, I mean like in the weeks leading up to the deadline and the deadline day. So I'm not accounting for the trades that always happen where like a team is sending some player you didn't even know was in the league for a second round pick for, salary cap implications. I'm not predicting those fucking trades. So we're going to be relying on Google Docs pretty heavily for today's video. Thank you, Google Docs. I love you.
I love you too, slightly.
I split each and every team into 4 separate categories. You have the buyers, obviously, don't need to say much about this. The sellers, obviously, don't need to say much about this category either. The wild cards, this is the category I love. These are the teams where you could tell me they make a huge move to improve the roster, and it wouldn't shock me. Or you could tell me they make a huge move to sell off pieces on their roster for assets, and that wouldn't shock me either. And the final category I have is the opportunists. These are teams that, most of these teams are rebuilding or are developing a young core and are doing a really good job at that. It don't really need much, but if a team were to just blow them away for an offer for somebody on their team already, or an opportunity presented itself to improve their roster, then they should go for it, and they probably would go for it. Now, before you say, wait, slightly, isn't that pretty much every fucking team in the league? Shouldn't every team be doing that? Yes, but these teams are special because they're typically rebuilding teams and teams that don't really need to make a move. Like, they just need to hold steady and just ride out what they currently have. But let's just start with the opportunists here so you guys get a better understanding of what I'm talking about. Like the Oklahoma City Thunder, they are the perfect example for this tier. If they really wanted to, they could improve this roster. They're 24-25 right now as of the time I'm recording this, 11th in the West, only half a game back from 10th, so half a game back from a play-in spot, 1 game back from 6th, and 2 games back from 4th. So heading into the trade deadline, they're only 2 games back from hosting a playoff series. Now, the problem is, for a lot of these teams in the West, we're going to talk about, like, there's not a lot of separation between 3 and, like, 13, right? But the problem is, for some of these teams that are on the outside looking into the play-in, you have to jump, like, 6 different teams to get to these spots. I think it should also be pointed out the Thunder are 1.5 games up on the 13th seed Lakers. So they could lose some games and sort of free fall a little bit. I think the Chet Holmgren stuff, right? Obviously, he's missed his whole entire season with injury. He'll be back next year. To me, that just means they're not going to do anything. Like, they have just so many solid, good, young players. They don't really need to trade any of them for picks. Like, they already have way too many picks. And I feel like before they make a big move, which is coming at some point, before they make a big move, they should just see what they have with Chet. And because of that, I don't really think that they make a move. In fact, spoiler alert, I don't have them making a move at all this trade deadline. They have made a move in 4 of the last 5 years around the deadline, but none of those moves are really big. Like, maybe they get out of Darius Baisley, like maybe a team just blows them away with an offer for Kenrich Williams or Mike Muscala, but I just really doubt that they do anything. I think that they just wait and see what Chet Holmgren's all about next year. Now, next trade deadline, this will be a different story for the Thunder. They have 4 first-round picks in the 2024 draft. They don't have the roster space for all of those guys. Next trade deadline, the Thunder might be big-time players, but now, no. The New York Knicks I also have on here. Now, they're in a better spot than the Thunder, 27-24, 7th in the East, 1 game back from 6th, 3.5 games back from 11th. So them falling out of the play-in, not out of the realm of possibility, not likely, but not out of the realm of possibility. They've made a move around the trade deadline each of the last 5 seasons. They have 12 first-round picks to play with over the next 7 years. 4 of them are in the next draft, even though the Detroit and Washington picks they have are not going to convey since they're protected, and 10 second-round picks. So they got quite a lot of picks to move around. On top of that, they have really interesting young talent, right? And because of that, they don't really need to do anything right now. Like, there's no real pressure on them to make a big time move, to push all the chips in and make a run at the finals this year. There's also really not that much pressure to trade guys and acquire assets, because again, you have so many assets to work with. If they were to make a move, right, like more wing depth, more shooting, that makes a lot of sense. Obviously, you have like Cam Reddish, Derrick Rose, guys that they are very much trying to get rid of. And spoiler alert, I have them making moves at the trade deadline, and there's a possibility of a really big move. The Orlando Magic are also opportunists heading into this trade deadline. Again, kind of like the Thunder, just a really, really strong young core. Now they're 19-31, right? They're 13th in the East, 4.5 games back from a play-in spot. So the play-in dreams kind of feel dead for the Magic. They're only 5.5 games away from being a bottom 3 team, which would give you the 14% odds at Victor Wembanyama, and they're 3.5 up on the I'm saying up. They're 3.5 games worse than the Toronto Raptors as a bottom 5 team, which gives you a 10% chance. So right now, they're comfortably a bottom 5 team, 10% chance of landing the number 1 overall pick. I really doubt they make any big time moves to improve this roster, although they have been linked to Fred VanVleet. Like, that's something. It's like, this is what I'm saying for these opportunist teams. Like, if an opportunity presents itself for you to get a good player to help improve your team now and in the future, they might do it. And I could see the Magic. It wouldn't shock me, but it would also kind of shock me. I don't know. They've made a trade at the deadline each of the last 5 seasons. They've got 9 first-round picks to play around with, 13 seconds. And guys like Mo Bamba, RJ Hampton, Gary Harris, Terrence Ross, Cole Anthony, even his name's been brought up a couple times. Guys that they could move around in trades. Like Mo Bamba is like an obvious trade candidate. They want him out. RJ Hampton out of the rotation. The thing is I really can't figure out a trade that makes much sense for the Magic. And because of that, I don't have a trade for them in this deadline. Although I do think they make a move. I just think it's going to be something really, really small, like maybe Mo Bamba somewhere. Before you say, wait, Mo Bamba, that's not a small trade. Yes, it is. I do not think Mo Bamba is good. Sacramento Kings, they're 3rd in the West, 27-21, only 6 games back of the 1 seed. Like, I don't know, crazier things have happened, but they are only 2.5 games up on the 7 seed. So, you know, a rough couple of weeks, you could find yourself in the play-in. We've seen that from pretty much every team in the West so far this season has been the 3 seed at some point, it feels like. And they're only 3.5 games up on 11th. So the possibility of them falling out of the play-in altogether, it's not a 0% chance, but it's obviously not a very high chance. I mean, they've been really, really good so far this season. They've made a trade in each of the last 5 seasons. They have a 28 and 29 first-round pick they could play around with, but those are so far into the future. I doubt they really want to use those picks. They've got 9 second-round picks. Those could be pretty valuable. They desperately need a rim protector, right? Like, Sabonis has been awesome, but defensively, we know who he is. They could definitely use somebody who could protect the rim. And a 3-and-D wing that they could feel comfortable with in a playoff setting. You know, this is a young roster. There's some guys with playoff experience on it, no doubt about it. But if they want to make like a considerable run this postseason, I think they need guys that they could really trust to be in a playoff rotation. So if the opportunity presents itself to get a guy like that, I think they take it. And I do have them making a move. And I don't think it's going to be well received by Kings fans, but it's a move I could see happening. Utah Jazz, also opportunists. I think that this is a perfect spot for them. They're 26-26, 10th in the West, so they're currently in a play-in spot. However, they're only half a game up on the Oklahoma City Thunder, who are 11th. They're a game and a half back of 6th, so a playoff spot's not out of the realm of possibility. 3 games back from 4th, so them hosting a playoff game, still not a playoff series, still not out of the realm of possibility. 2 games from 13th, and if we just want to bookmark this, right, in case they really decide to tank, they're only 6 games back from having a 10% chance at the number 1 overall pick, being a bottom 5 team. They've made deadline moves 3 of the last 5 years. Obviously, this is a relatively new front office, though, so you can't really put too much stock into that. They have 14 first-round picks to play around with over the next 7 years and 4 second-round picks. So if they wanted to go for something, if like they became a sneaky mystery OG Anunoby team, they could do that. And then you just look at the roster. I mean, up and down it. There's Colin Sexton. Could he get traded? Mike Conley. Could he get traded? Kelly Olynyk, Jordan Clarkson, Jared Vanderbilt, Rudy Gay. Somebody's going to want that contract, right? All of these guys could get traded. And I have them making some moves, like some pretty considerable moves, but not as much as I would like. I think this team's going to be booked and busy at the deadline. It's just really hard to try and figure out where all of these guys end up. Let's get to the sellers. This one's self-explanatory, right? The Detroit Pistons, 13-38, worst in the Eastern Conference, second worst team in the NBA, only half a game up on the Rockets for being the worst team in the NBA. 2 up on Charlotte for having those 14% odds. So keep an eye on that. If you're a bottom 3 team, you want to hold on to that bottom 3 spot so you get a 14% chance of the number 1 overall pick. They have made a move in each of the last 5 seasons around the deadline, and they're usually pretty busy around the trade deadline. Nothing too gigantic outside of like the Blake Griffin trade, but you know, they made that move for Bagley last year, and that was kind of sizable. Like they usually do stuff at the deadline. Obviously, you've got Bojan Bogdanovic, Nerlens Noel, Alec Burks, Hamidou Diallo's a free agent. All of these guys could move, and I do have them making trades. So stay tuned. Charlotte Hornets, 15 and 36th, 14th in the Eastern Conference, the 4th worst team in the NBA, and they're only half a game up on the Detroit Pistons for being that number 3 spot, which again, if you're a tanking team, you want that. You want that 14% chance of the number 1 overall pick. It's the highest percentage chance any team can have. They've made a move in 3 of the last 5 trade deadline seasons. Montrezl Harrell's probably been their biggest move over the last 5 years, so they don't really do much at the trade deadline. Although this is one of the first times they've been like legitimately tanking. They've usually tried to be in that 8th, 9th, 10th seed range. This time, they're legitimately selling guys off. And you've got some guys, you know, this is a difficult team to predict. You've got Terry Rozier, but who's going to want that contract? Gordon Hayward, who the fuck's going to want that contract? Kelly Oubre, is he moving the needle much for any real contending team? Jalen McDaniels and PJ Washington, those are 2 interesting guys, young guys. Jalen McDaniels has had a lot of interest, it sounds like. PJ Washington, both of those guys are free agents. Jalen McDaniels, unrestricted. PJ Washington restricted. So I don't know. This is a tough team to predict. Oh, and how can we forget Mason Plumlee, Plum Dog millionaire, who has made me damn near a millionaire. No, that's not true at all. Okay, nowhere close to a millionaire, but damn near made me a millionaire on Prize Picks. Like, I've been choosing Mason Plumlee's fantasy score on Prize Picks. It seems like he hits every single time. Did you just say Prize Picks? Yeah, Prize Picks. Oh, nice. Did you use code SLIGHTLY when signing up for Prize Picks? No. Unfortunately, I didn't. I made my Prize Picks before. Shut the up. You're an idiot. I love using Prize Picks, man. It just makes watching NBA games so much more enjoyable when you can bet on player props, over on points, under on points, over on 3-pointers made. I always love betting on like the obscure role players because it just makes it so much more like betting over on Reggie Block 9 points. You know he's only going to get 5 or 6 shots a game. So whenever he shoots, it just leaves you on the edge of your seat. I absolutely love Prize Picks. If you guys want in on the action, you can sign up for Prize Picks. I'll put the link in the description below. Use code SLIGHTLY when signing up, and Prize Picks will match your first deposit up to $100. You deposit $100, you get $100 to play around with. What a deal. Use code SLIGHTLY when signing up for Prize Picks. Helps out the channel. Thanks. I have the Hornets making moves, but maybe not as many moves as I would like. Like, I like to think that they would really be trading, but again, who wants Terry Rozier? Who's begging for that contract? Houston Rockets, worst team in the NBA. Don't really need to talk much about them. They're terrible. They've made a move in 4 of the last 5 trade deadlines. Another difficult team to predict because you look at them and it's like, who really is on this team that people are going to want? Eric Gordon? But I read a post on the Rockets subreddit that somebody who's been right in the past and somehow has an inside source is saying that the Rockets love Eric Gordon and have told him that he's not getting traded, and Eric Gordon told them he wants to bought out so he go to the Phoenix Suns. I don't know, something to keep an eye on there. Like KJ Martin, his name was brought up, but they would be dumb to do that at this point. Garrison Matthews, like, who wants Boban? Like, I don't have them making a trade. I just don't. For their position, you would like to think there are guys you could trade off, but I just don't know. Spurs, 14 and 36th. They are 14th in the Western Conference. They do have a bottom 3 spot as of right now, which is good for them, right? They've only made trade deadline moves in 2 of the last 5 years. Granted, they were both 2022, 2021. Obviously, you had the big Derek White trade a year ago. But again, this is a team that was just kind of okay in the 2018, 2019, 2020, and have only recently, you know, really started selling and really being tankers. Guys like Jakob Poeltl, obviously his name's been brought up a bunch. Zach Collins, Josh Richardson, Doug McDermott, all of these guys could be moved. And here's something to keep an eye on. They have $27 million in cap space. They are the only team that really has cap space to absorb contracts if they wanted to. And they're $14 million away from the salary cap floor. And if they don't get to that number, they'll just have to pay the guys on their roster, right, the $14 million to make up for that so they can get to the salary cap floor. So I could see them being, at bare minimum, like a third team in 3-team trades that helps absorb salary. I have them making some moves. Nothing major, but I have them making some moves. And the Toronto Raptors, they're sellers. Like, there's no wild card. They are sellers. They should be selling. They selling. 23 and 28th, 12th in the Eastern Conference, a game back from 10th, so it's not like they're too far away. 3.5 games back from the 6th seed. 3.5 games away from having a 10% chance at Wemby. So if they wanted to just bottom out, they could definitely do it. And the way that they've looked this year, they could trade off some key pieces, bottom out, while still having good players if they do end up getting lucky in the lottery. Fred VanVleet, Gary Trent, both of those guys clutch clients. Fred VanVleet just became a clutch client. OG Anunoby, I think he's a clutch client too. Siakam, that would be crazy. Chris Boucher, Thad Young, all of these guys. I have the Raptors making some pretty sizable moves. Buyers, let's just sail through these teams because we know who these guys are. The Boston Celtics, 36-15, first in the NBA, 2.5 games up on second place in the Eastern Conference, 5.5 games up on the 5 seed. I'm only saying that because, you know, if they were to have a terrible month or two, you know, maybe they become the 5 seed. Probably not. They've made moves in 3 of the last 5 years. Obviously, they made the big Derek White trade a year ago that helped propel them to a finals contending team. And they don't need shit. Like, there's not a trade out there. They do have 2025 first that they can play around with. They have some second round picks they can play around with. But there's not a trade out there that gives them a guy who even cracks their playoff rotation. Like, that's how stupidly good this roster is. I just don't see it. I do have them making a trade because they have some front court depth issues, right? There's some concerns about Robert Williams. They could use, like, some more wing depth. But anybody they would trade for would be, like, a regular season player. Like, just guys that could help them absorb some minutes as they head into the playoffs. Probably nobody who's going to get playoff minutes. I do have them making a move. You're going to be shocked at it. The Brooklyn Nets, obviously, they are buyers as well. 30-19, fourth in the Eastern Conference. 5 games back from the 1 seed. Half a game up on Cleveland for home court advantage in a playoff series. And 4 games up on the 7th seed. So they're pretty comfortable in the playoff mix right now. They've made a move in 4 of the last 5 deadlines. Obviously, you had the massive James Harden trade last year. Like, they've made some pretty sizable trades over the last 5 years. They have 5 second-round picks to move around. I don't even think they have access to a first-round pick. They could use some front court depth, some floor stretching. Somebody could shoot the ball, wings. Like, every contending team could use another wing, right? They're very in-demand players. I do have them making a semi-sizable move. I do have them making one. Cleveland Cavaliers, 31-21, 5th in the Eastern Conference. Half a game back from Brooklyn for the 4 seed, right? Hosting a playoff series. You would love to do that, right? You would love to get a top 4 so you can at least host one postseason series. 5.5 games back from the 1 seed and only 3.5 up on the 7 seed. Like, that's something to keep an eye on. That's literally like 2 bad weeks of basketball from really being in danger of falling into the play-in, which no team wants, obviously. They have made a trade in each of the last 5 trade deadlines, and they have an obvious need, right? Like, wing, again, every buying team could use another wing, but they really could. Like, they could really use a guy who could start at the 3, be a really strong starter, and that would really help propel them. If they were to get lucky and get a legitimately good wing upgrade from Karis LeVert, they could legitimately become championship contending team this year. Unfortunately for them, they have 0 first-round picks to play around with. 8 seconds, which is sizable. I do have them making a move. Is it the big, gigantic move that propels them to a championship contending team? I don't know. You're going to have to wait and see. Denver Nuggets, 34-16, first in the Western Conference. I mean, they've looked tremendous this season. 2 up on Memphis, who's currently the 2 seed, and 8 games up on the 5 seed. So they're very comfortable at the top of the West. I think it would shock me if they fell out of that 1 seed at this point. They've made a move in 4 of the last 5 trade deadline seasons, 3 straight seasons in a row. Nothing too major. They're usually pretty quiet at the deadline. They might make a move here and there to marginally upgrade their team. They could really use a defensive-minded wing that they feel comfortable plugging in. Lots of rumors about Bones Highland flying around. Like, I don't know what the deal is there. I'm wondering if there's more to this with Bones Highland. And they could also use front court depth. Now, of course, there's a conspiracy theory that they like having bad backup centers because it helps boost Jokic's numbers, his on-off splits, his advanced stats, but they could desperately use a guy. Even though that guy might only get like 7-8 minutes in a playoff game, those 7-8 minutes with Jokic off the floor could really be the make or break for your entire season. So they need an upgrade at that point. They need an upgrade at that spot for sure. They can only use their 2029 first-round pick because of some protections they have, I think, in that Orlando Magic trade for Aaron Gordon. 4 second-round picks. They do have a $9.1 million trade exception, which is one of the bigger ones in the entire NBA. It might be the biggest one from the Monte Morris trade in the summer that they could use. And I do have them making some pretty big moves. I have them going in. I have them going for it this year. Golden State, I'll just save you guys. I don't have them making a move, right? They're 25-24, 6th in the Western Conference, 0 games up on the 7th seed. So, you know, I think there's a 4-way tie currently on the for this. It's like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I think are all in a 4-way tie. I could be wrong. They're only a game up on the 11th seed. So again, a week of bad basketball, they could find themselves outside of the playoff picture entirely. But they're also only 1 game back from the 4 seed. So a good week of basketball, and boom, you're hosting a playoff series. They've only made trades in 2021 and 2020. Obviously, 2020 was the D'Angelo Russell trade. Usually very, very quiet at the trade deadline. They need wing depth, right? They have some areas of weakness for sure. They could use 26, 27, 28, 29 first, 5 second-round picks. The problem is, with the tax situation, it's really, really hard to figure out what they do and what makes sense financially, and I don't have a trade for them. Clippers currently hold on to the 4 spot in the Western Conference, 28-25, a game and a half back from the Kings for 3rd, only a game up on the 7th seed, and 2 games up on the 11th seed. So again, a bad week of basketball, they're fucked. Have made a move in each of the last 5 seasons, and they've been booked and busy at the trade deadline, right? They're usually pretty active players at the trade deadline. Blake Griffin in 2018, you guys remember that? That one was shocking. The Blake Griffin trade. Tobias Harris and Zubats in 2019. Marcus Morris, they gave up a first for Marcus Morris in 2020. Rondo in 2021. Not that big, but they did make a trade for him. And Norman Powell last year, which was a pretty big move. They need a point guard, like they do. Terrence Mann's been pretty good in that role, but they need a legit guy that they can rely on consistently in a playoff series. And some front court depth. Moses Brown's just not cutting it, man. They need and a Marcus Morris upgrade. Like this team, Kawhi's look great this season, but they could really use something. They got the 28 and 29 first-round picks that they could play with, 6 seconds. They've been linked to a bunch of point guards. Like pretty much every available point guard has been linked to the Los Angeles Clippers. I have them making a decently big move. Lakers, I'm putting them on here because they are already buyers. They've already went out and bought at the trade deadline, even though they are 23 and 27, 13th in the West. They're 2 games back from the 10th spot, right? They don't want to find themselves in a position where all of a sudden it's like March 7th. And you're like, oh, fuck, we're still 2.5 games out of the play-in. Like, yes, in theory, this team would be terrifying in the play-in and in the first round, but you got to get in there. Like, you got to find yourself in the play-in first and foremost. They are only 2.5 games back from the 6th seed, which would be huge. They made a trade in 4 of the last 5 seasons. Obviously, they've already made a trade this year. They still have those 27, 28, 29 first-round picks that they can play around with. They still have 4 second-rounds picks that they could trade and play around with. They need shooting. They just need some more talent, right? And they need to do their free agency now, right? Like, they're going to have a lot of money to spend in the offseason, but with the Rui Hachimura trade, them wanting to bring him back, they're not going to have the max salary spot that it looked like they were going to have. So maybe they just do their free agent shopping now, and I do have them making a pretty sizable trade. Memphis Grizzlies, obviously, you know, they're one of these teams, 32 and 18, a really young team that's just playing amazing, right? Their window, you would like to think their window's really big, but this has to be pointed out every time people say this. You never fucking know how big windows can be, right? Windows can be small. Windows can be way smaller than you thought. So I think that they should try and be at least somewhat aggressive this trade deadline. They're 2 games back from the 1 spot, 6 games up on the 5 seed. So again, like Memphis and Denver, they're comfortable. Like 1-2, something crazy would have to happen for them to not be the 1 and 2 seed heading into the playoffs. They made trades in 3 of the last 5 seasons. Outside of the Marc Gasol trade, they usually don't really do anything that big at the trade deadline. They have all of their picks at their disposal, a 2025 Golden State pick that they could use. They need shot creators, man. They need offense. They are the worst half-court offense out of any playoff team in the NBA currently. Like, it gets hard to watch sometimes, and that concerns me for them in the playoffs. That concerns me greatly. Defensively, they're awesome. In transition, they're awesome, but the game slows down in the playoffs, and we see this time in and time out. These bad half-court offenses that are kind of transition merchants in the playoffs, things get a little bit rough. Things get a little bit ugly for them. I tried to get something to happen for them, but I couldn't. I just couldn't. They're a hard team to make deals with because of their contract situation. They don't really have bad contracts. So it's like the guys that they would have to send out to make contracts work are valuable players in their rotation. So unless you're getting a really, really big name in return, which I don't think they're going to do right now, it's hard for me to imagine much. I don't think they do anything at the trade deadline, even though I wish they would. Miami, they've been great lately, 28 and 23, 6th in the Eastern Conference, 1 game up on the 7th seed, 4.5 games up on the 11th seed, just something to keep an eye on, and only 3 games back of the 4 seed. They've made a trade in each of the last 5 seasons. They're usually booked and busy. Pat Riley is. They need a legit starting 4. That's been a huge need for them all year. And a Kyle Lowry upgrade. Or a Kyle Lowry suitor. They just got to get him off the fucking team. This has been a disaster. He hasn't been very good at all. Like, Gabe Vincent has looked better than him. I have them making a pretty sizable trade. The Bucks, obviously, buyers, the 3rd seed in the Eastern Conference, 33 and 17, 2.5 games back from the 1 seed, 3 games up on the 5 seed, so they're pretty comfortable in that top 3 mix. A trade in 4 of the last 5 years. They have the 2029 first to play around with, 8 seconds. They need a wing. Obviously, their name has been linked to Jay Crowder, and I do have them making a Jay Crowder trade. There was rumors about one almost happened. The Jay Crowder shit's really weird because it's like public negotiations. Like every part of this negotiation has been shared on Twitter. I've never seen anything like it. The Pelicans, even though they've been in a rut lately due to injuries mainly, I have them listed as a buyer. They're 26 and 25, 8th in the Western Conference, tied for the 6th spot. So it's not like they're far away from being a playoff team. 1 game back from 4th and only 1 game up on the 11th. So if they continue to like fall, it could get a little bit spooky for them. They made a trade in 4 of the last 5 deadlines, they need some shooting, some reliable shooting, consistent shooting, guys who can catch and shoot, guys who can space the floor, guys that they could count on in a playoff series, guy who could create his own shot would also be nice, and maybe some more front court depth. They have all of their picks, Lakers 23, Lakers 24, and I couldn't believe this, but from the Drew Holiday trade, they still have the Bucks 24, 25, 26, and 27 first. Obviously, some of those are pick swaps. I do have them making a trade that I absolutely love for them. So stay tuned. And the last buyer, the Philadelphia 76ers, second in the Eastern Conference. They look like legitimate, real contenders. 2.5 games back from the Celtics for the 1 seed, 3 games up on the 5 seed. So again, pretty comfortable in the top 3 mix. 4 of the last 5 years, they made a move at the trade deadline. Obviously, last year was the gigantic James Harden trade. And they also made that really big Tobias Harris trade at the deadline back in 2019. So they are not a stranger to making big moves. They need to back up big, someone who can replace Montrezl Harrell, some shooting along the wing. Getting under the tax is apparently something that is really important to them, so keep an eye out for that. I do have them making a couple of moves that I honestly really like for them. And finally, my favorite tier, the wild cards. What do these teams do? The Atlanta Hawks, obviously, they are a major wild card. If you were to ask me a month ago, I would have said there was a greater than 0% chance that Trae Young gets traded, like the way that the direction of the season was headed for them. Obviously, I don't think that's the case anymore. Not that I thought it was the case then, but not a greater than 0% chance. They're 25 and 25, 8th in the Eastern Conference, 2.5 games back from the 6th spot, 2 games up on the 11th spot. The thing with the East is the Knicks are in a hard-fought battle with the Heat, but it feels like the top 6 is starting to fall into place. So these play-in teams, it's kind of time for them to start doing shit. They've made a move in each of the last 5 seasons, some decently big moves too, like getting Clint Capella. What do they do this year though? Do they trade John Collins? Do they make a move to get better? Do they go for OG? Like, do they go for Pascal? I've seen some Hawks fans say that. I don't really see how that happens. They need shooters. They need guys, like they traded Kevin Huerter. They need a guy who could shoot the basketball. They have a 2023 first round pick they could trade, 2029 first. I have them making a decently big move that I don't know if Hawks fans are going to love, but I have it. The Bulls obviously are in this mix as well, 23 and 26. They currently are in the play-in. They're the 10 seed. They made 3 trades in the last 5 years. 2021 obviously was the Vucevic trade, a very big move for them. They only have 1 second-round pick to trade, but they have guys like Alex Caruso, Zach LaVine, DeMar, Vucevic. Like, Vuce is a free agent in the summer. What do they do? If you were to tell me that they make some moves along the edges to improve their team, I could believe that. But if they just... If all of this talk of them running it back was just a smokescreen, they end up blowing it the fuck up, that wouldn't necessarily surprise me either. I do have them making a couple of moves that I think are pretty decent for them. Here they are, the Dallas Mavericks. This is I don't know if this is just because I'm a fan of this team, but this might be the hardest team to predict heading into the trade deadline. They're 26 and 25, 7th in the Western Conference, obviously tied with those fucking 15 other teams for the 6th seed. 1 game back from the 4 seed, 1 game up on the 11th seed. So again, these teams in the West, if you're trying to be good, you have to do something to separate yourself from this gigantic clump of teams. They made a trade each of the last 5 seasons. In fact, they've made a trade around the deadline every single year since 2016. Now, granted, most of these trades are usually small. Like, they usually try to address an area of need with a small trade. Think a couple years ago they needed shooting after trading Seth Curry. Let's go out and get JJ Redick. Obviously, that didn't fucking work. We needed a big. Let's go out and get Willie Cauley-Stein. Obviously, that didn't work. The one exception is the 2 KP trades, trading for KP and then trading KP away. They have 27, 28, 29 firsts that they can play around with. Only 2 second-round picks. Their biggest need? Talent. They need talent. Like, it doesn't really matter the position. Would love to get a rebounder, but they just really need talent. And you know what? They might be sellers. Like, there's some reports coming out as of today that the Dallas Mavericks might actually be shopping guys, which wouldn't really shock me all that much either. I have them making 3 trades, and if the trade deadline shaped up like this, I would be very, very concerned about the future of this franchise. That's all I'm going to say. Just stick around. Indiana. What do? Obviously, they just extended Miles Turner, and I don't think he's going anywhere, so they're probably holding on to him. They're currently 11th in the East, only half a game back from a play-in spot, 4.5 games back from the 6th seed. Again, that just kind of seems... The top 6-7 teams seem to be really solidifying themselves in those roles. And they are only 4 games away from a 10% chance at the number 1 overall pick. Don't sleep on that, right? Don't sleep on that if they decide to pull the plug here. They have all picks at their disposal, all of their own picks at their disposal, and they have 3 first-round picks in this upcoming draft. Their own, Boston, and Cleveland. So keep that in mind. Do they want to keep all 3 of these picks? Do they trade Buddy Hield? Do they trade Chris Duarte, who's been mentioned? Obviously, I don't think they trade Miles Turner. I think that ship has sailed. TJ McConnell, does a team just blow them away with an offer for him? Or do they take advantage of all these picks they have and go after a big name? Like, are they an OG team? Are they a sleeper OG Anunoby team? Are they a John Collins team? something to keep an eye on. I do have them making some sizable moves that I really like for them. Minnesota Timberwolves, quietly the 5 seed. They are currently 5th in the Western Conference, only 2 games back of Sacramento for that 3 spot, and of course only half a game up on the 7 seed and 1.5 games back from the 11th. Obviously, again, the Western Conference. They've only had a busy trade deadline once in the last 5 years, and that was in 2020 when they traded for D'Angelo Russell, and now we're coming full circle because the biggest question mark for them is what the fuck do they do with D'Angelo Russell? They have 3 second-round picks to move on from. They also have Naz Reid, right, who's a free agent at the end of the season. His name has been brought up in trade rumors quite a bit, and I have them making 0 moves, which means that they keep D'Angelo Russell, who's been playing pretty well as of late, and Naz Reid. I just couldn't figure out a trade that made that much sense. And this is a team that historically has been pretty quiet around the trade deadline, and they probably have some serious PTSD from what happened in the summer. I wouldn't be surprised if GMs around the league like put them on a probation period. Like, hey, guys, you fucked up the trade market so bad. Let's go a whole 365 days without you guys making a trade, okay? Phoenix, I'm shocked that they're in this tier and not in the buyer's tier, but they're an interesting team, only 1 game over 500, 9th in the Western Conference. They have made a trade in 4 of the last 5 seasons. What do? Do they trade DeAndre Ayton, who has not been good this season, and looks like he's just done? Who do they get for Jay Crowder? Do they get somebody who can legitimately help their team now? They have all of their first-round picks at their disposal, all of their second-round picks at their disposal. They have some contracts that can be moved around and used in trades to get bigger contracts. Do they make a big swing for the fences move? They've been linked to some pretty big name guys over the past couple of weeks, and just as recently as today, they were linked to OG Anunoby. So do they make a big all-in trade? Remember, they have a new owner coming in who I'm assuming is going to want to make a splash immediately. I don't know. A team to keep an eye on. I have a couple pretty sizable moves for them. And the Portland Trailblazers, 3 games under 500. They should be sellers. Like, they just should. They're only 4.5 games away from having a 10% chance at Wembanyama if they really just wanted to tank the rest of the season. They have made a trade in each of the last 5 seasons, and pretty sizable trades, right? Norm 2 years ago, CJ last year. They've shown that, hey, if we want to pull the plug on this, they're willing to do it. I'll give them respect in that regard. What do they do this year? Do they move Josh Hart? That's something they've been linked to. Do they move Jeremy Grant? Like, that's a guy who there's been nothing about him at all in the trade deadline, which kind of makes me worried and concerned. Kind of makes me think that there might actually be something going on behind the scenes. Nurkic, his name's been brought up. What do they do at the trade deadline? I do have them making a deal. All right, let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into these trades. I think I have 15. There might be more. I might have miscalculated, but I think I have 15 trades. Most of them pretty sizable, okay? Starting with this one. Goga Bitadze to the Boston Celtics for a future 2nd-round pick. Do not click off this video. I promise this is the only trade I have that's this marginal. I originally started, you could tell because I was going alphabetical order. I originally started thinking, I want to predict all of the small trades that always happen during the trade deadline. And this was the first one I did. And then I decided, you know what, I'm not doing that shit anymore. Goga fits perfectly into the trade exception that the Celtics have. I saw something on the Celtics subreddit that he's like, his agent it currently represents a bunch of guys who have played for the Celtics in the past. So it kind of makes sense. It gives them some front court depth for free. He's out of the rotation in Indiana, and they just brought Miles Turner back. So I don't really see a pathway for him getting minutes. And again, it's not a guy who's going to get minutes in the playoffs. It's a guy who gives you some insurance, gives you a guy big you could throw out there if Rob Williams not playing, or you want to give Al Horford a rest or something like that. He's a smart offensive player, which is why I think he kind of fits in Boston. He passes really well for a big. Defensively, it's bad. Slow-footed. Bad defensive sitter, doesn't switch very well. So he doesn't really fit the Celtics in that regard. But I don't know, just a front court depth piece that they could add here. I just don't foresee them really going after Jakob Poeltl or anything. So Goga Bitadze, welcome to the Celtics. How about a reunion here? Andre Drummond going back to Philadelphia, reuniting with the 76ers. Sixers could use another big man. They could use some front court help. Montrezl Harrell, just not really cutting it, man. Just not really a guy you feel all that comfortable with getting minutes in the playoffs. And Drummond's not going to be a guy who gets a lot, but just help you survive a little bit in non-Embiid minutes. I have Daniel House here, right? There's a couple of guys that the Sixers could use in a trade. Matisse Thybulle is one. Cork Maz, Jaden Springer. I have all of those guys in a different trade. So Daniel House, I'm just putting here. I don't know if he would get traded. I don't know if this would be who it was. It's just mainly a salary cap thing. And a 2nd-round pick. Like, I can't imagine Drummond's that expensive. He's out of the rotation in Chicago. And it just gives the Sixers another big that they can put behind Joel Embiid, a guy that they've had before, a guy who's been in that building, knows what it's all about. A reunion here makes some sense. I see Andre Drummond being on the move. Like, I see some team out there making a move for Drummond and just heading back to Philly It makes sense. Here we go. Here come the Dallas Mavericks trades. I put myself, listen, this is not like what I want to happen at the trade deadline. This is me legitimately trying to get in the head of NBA GMs and mainly trying to get in the head of the Dallas Mavericks front office. And this feels through and through like a Dallas Mavericks trade. A trade where it happens and you're just like, okay, what the hell is this trade? The Kings get Reggie Bullock and JaVale McGee. I threw a second rounder in here. I don't know if they would have to throw a second round pick. I'm struggling to figure out the value for some of these guys. And the Mavericks in return get Rashawn Holmes and Terrence Davis. Two guys for the Kings that are out of the rotation. Okay, and before Kings fans are like, what the fuck is this trade? The Rashawn Holmes contract is not very good. And Terrence Davis is a free agent at the end of the year. So these aren't like real coveted assets by any stretch of the imagination. Reggie Bullock gives the Kings a wing player who has done it in the playoffs, who was really big. I mean, we could shit all over Reggie Bullock. He hasn't been that great to start the season, but he has been picking up lately, right? He did perform really well in the playoffs last year and was a big reason why the Mavericks made the Western Conference Finals run. Like him and Dorian Finney-Smith's defense last season, especially in that series against the Suns, without it, they do not win that series. Like without them clamping up in the final 4 games of that series, the Mavericks do not move on. So Reggie Bullock gives you a guy who's done it in the playoffs before, a guy who you can rely on in a playoff setting, and a guy who defensively can help tremendously. And JaVale McGee, kind of the same thing. Like, yes, he's been trash, and he's been completely out of the rotation. This is why, like, I think JaVale's getting traded. Although you look at his contract, it's 3 years, $6 million a year. The last year's a player option. Not really a great contract, but also not terrible. Like, $6 million is whatever. But he doesn't play at all. Like, he is completely out of the Mavericks rotation. Even with Maxi Kleber out, even with Christian Wood out, JaVale McGee does not see the floor whatsoever, which kind of leads me to believe it's over. Like they're getting ready to move on from him. And the Kings, who could use a rim protector, again, JaVale McGee's not the greatest one, but just a guy who can get some spot minutes. I don't know. This trade kind of makes some sense. It also makes some sense from the Mavericks' perspective of, oh, Rashawn Holmes. We wanted that guy one time. Remember that? Now we finally have him. Plum Dog Millionaire. Let's get him back in Denver, right? He fits the trade exception the Nuggets have from the Monte Morris trade perfectly. $9 million. The exception is $9.1 million. So he fits it like a glove. Let's get him back in Denver to back up Nikola Jokic. It makes some sense, right? You look at all of the backup centers that Jokic has had. Plumlee's probably the best one, but the ones who have really succeeded, like Plumlee, like DeMarcus Cousins last year, guys who can pass, guys who you could run a similar offense with Jokic, big men who can operate in the high post and pass out of the high post. Plumlee is that guy. He's been really fucking good over the last month. Like, he has been really good. I know the last memory that Nuggets fans have of Mason Plumlee is sagging off of Anthony Davis and letting him hit that game-winning shot in the bubble. But, hey, if you look past that, you get one of the better backup bigs in the NBA for 2 second-round picks. I know it was reported that the Hornets won a first. That shit's not happening. And Plumlee's an unrestricted free agent in the summer. So they get some second-round picks. The Hornets do. And the Nuggets get a really strong backup center. Now, there's some conspiracy theories that the Nuggets don't like having good backup centers because it boosts Jokic's on-off stats and all of his advanced metrics. Don't know if that's true, but hey, let's see. Do they go after? They've been rumored to get Naz Reid. I don't know if I like that much for them. Mason Plumlee does make some sense though, and he fits this trade exception like a glove. So let's just make it happen. It would pain me, you know, the Plumlee money machine, Prize Picks printer. It would come to a sad, unfortunate end. But all good things, you know, it's the stars that shine the brightest that burn the fastest. I like this trade a lot for the Pelicans. I like this trade a lot. Alec Burks on the move, traded from Detroit to New Orleans for Devontae Graham, Jackson Hayes, and a first-round pick. Pelicans got a ton of picks that they can move on from, so this shouldn't be that big of a deal. And they get a really strong upgrade to Devontae Graham, a guy who could catch and shoot, a knockdown three-point shooter, a guy who can also create his own shot, a guy who you feel comfortable with in a playoff setting. Like, you feel comfortable rolling with in a postseason series, and a guy who's not too shabby of a defender either. I think this would be a great upgrade for the Pelicans. You know, they're linked to, like, OG Anunoby, and while I would like that, it's like, does he really, like, what, is he that big of an upgrade for you? Like, obviously, Alec Burks is nowhere near the player OG is, but he, like, is a legitimately big upgrade for something that you need. A shooter, a shot creator, and he can defend a little bit. Upgrades the Devontae Graham position. Like, I think this is a really good trade, a really good pickup for the Pelicans, a really good trade target for them. And for the Pistons, right, Jackson Hayes, a guy with upside, I don't know. He's a free agent in the summer. I don't know if they even give him some run. But Devontae Graham, another guy who's been pretty good in the past, that you could just kind of throw in, right? Let him get some shots up. Hopefully rebuild his value up a little bit so you could flip him down the line the same way you did with Alec Burks, the same way you might do with Nerlens Noel, who's not playing at all actually, the same way that you're doing currently with Bojan Bogdanovic. Like, it would be a nice move for them, I think, and they get the first round pick in return. I like the trade. I like it. Here's the Cam Reddish is getting traded. I'm almost 99% convinced, but it's like I can't where does he go? Because every team that's rumored to be interested in him is a contender, and it's like he's been on 2 good teams already and has not played for them, the Hawks and the Knicks, because he wanted a bigger role. I don't know what contending team is like ready to give him the role that he wants. So him going to a non-contending team is what makes the most sense for me, so he could really build up his value in the final couple months of the season before he hits restricted free agency. San Antonio gives him that option. And also, San Antonio, I mentioned this earlier, they are $27 million below the cap. And what was it, $14 million, $11 million above the floor. So they might have to make some moves if they want to reach that, and bringing on Evan Fournier's contract is a way they can do that. It's also a way for them to get a pick in return for this. That Fournier contract is absolutely terrible. I don't know if the Knicks would need to attach a first for this, but again, the Knicks have so many picks to play around with. One of the benefits of having that many picks is that you could get off of bad salaries, and this would be an opportunity for that, while also getting 2 really, really good contributing role players in Doug McDermott and Josh Richardson. Dougie McBuckets, man, he's been really slept on since he's gone to the Spurs. He shot over 40% from 3, knockdown 3-point shooter, movement shooter. You can run him off of screens, pin downs, whatever it is that you want to do. Get him in motion, and defenses have to stick him. They're not a guy. He's not a guy that you can leave open. He's not a guy that you could contest late to. You got to stick on that dude whenever he's on the floor. It gives him some much needed shooting. And Josh Richardson's just a really solid wing depth player, right? He's been there in the past. He's done it. He's been good since he's been on the Spurs, knocking down threes, playing defense. There's some shot creation value there too. So just some 2 really solid role players. They get off of Cam Reddish, who wants out. They get off the Evan Fournier contract. It costs a pick, but you also improve your depth in the process. I think this is a trade that makes sense for both sides. Now, would the Spurs be really interested in letting Cam Reddish do all the shit that he wants to do to help prop up his value? I don't know, but hey, we'll find out. And Evan Fournier, Spurs, French connection with Tony Parker. Does that exist? I don't know. Next up, another move I'm patting myself on the back for. I like this trade a lot. Josh Hart to the 76ers for Korkmaz, Matisse Thybulle, Jaden Springer, and a 2nd round pick. I like this deal a lot. For the Sixers, they get a dude who they could plug into their playoff rotation immediately, a guy who can defend on the wing, a guy who could, in theory, shoot the 3 ball. It hasn't been that great this season, but he has done it in the past. He hasn't been a very willing shooter. And I know Sixers fans do not like their unwilling shooters, but maybe a change of scenery would help Josh Hart. He's a free agent at the end of the year. I think he has a player option. I could be wrong on that, but he's a free agent at the end of the year. It's reported the Trailblazers are shopping him. I know the return's not great, but I don't know with what Josh Hart has shown this season if he's worthy of a 1st round pick. In this scenario, the Trailblazers are getting Matisse Thybulle, who could help them defensively. Maybe a guy maybe it's a guy that they plug in. I mean, they're trying to win, right? So you don't you get a player who could help right now in Matisse Thybulle, the Trailblazers do, and a young guy in Jaden Springer you could add to the mix. They also get a 2nd round pick in this scenario. I like this trade a lot for both sides, honestly. I don't know how much you're getting for Josh Hart. The 76ers get a really, really solid role player that they could plug into the rotation immediately off the bench. I like this move a lot for them. Helps them defensively, mightily, and a guy who you feel comfortable with in the playoffs. That's what you got to think about. All of these guys for contending teams, can they play in a playoff series? If the answer is yes, it makes sense. You need to have the need and the means for a trade to make sense. This one makes sense for me for the 76ers. Maybe there are some suitors out there who would be willing to throw a 1st for Josh Hart. I don't know. Maybe the Pelicans do that. But I think the Alec Burks trades makes more sense for them, right? A shooter, a guy who can shoot the basketball. And Josh Hart has not been good at that this year. Another Mavericks trade. Karis LeVert straight up for Tim Hardaway Jr. I'm hesitant about this one because this trade has been reported. This trade was talked about, that the Cavs and Mavs were discussing this. And typically, when the Mavericks make trades, and they make a lot of trades compared to other NBA teams, but typically when they make trades, they're trades that you don't hear about. They just happen, right? The Mavericks, I got to give them credit here. Their front office, it's a shit show, but at least they're usually tight-lipped. There's not a lot of leaks. But this one's been talked about. It makes a lot of sense for both sides, right? We know the Mavericks, they're cheap as a motherfucker, right? We already know this. This gives them an opportunity to get off of a long contract in Tim Hardaway Jr., and they get a player in Karis LeVert, who I definitely think is a bit of a downgrade, especially in the shooting department, but he does provide some creation potential, some playmaking potential that you do need, and he's also, I think, a little bit better of a defender. Maybe not too much of a defender, but I think he's had his moments defensively for the Cavaliers this year. And the Cavs are getting a knockdown 3-point shooter that they can plug into their starting lineup or even off the bench to pair alongside Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, a 3-point shooter that you absolutely have to put a body on, a 3-point shooter who's going to let that shit fly, and a 3-point shooter who has done pretty well in playoff settings. You know, that series against the Clippers a couple years ago, Tim Hardaway Jr. like damn near, I wouldn't say single-handedly won games because Luka Doncic was being Luka Doncic, but he was going the fuck off from 3 and Mavericks wins, like going crazy. So the Cavaliers need a guy like that. And on top of that, right, another reason why I think this trade makes some sense for them, they need an upgrade at the wing. Considering their assets, there's not a lot of options out there. Tim Hardaway Jr. also gives them the guy under contract so they can go into next season without having to worry about paying Karis LeVert, have a guy under contract that you could still look to upgrade from, but you at least have him on the team moving forward whenever you're trying to win in playoff settings. And I think Tim Hardaway Jr. is a guy, he's a good enough shooter that you could feel pretty confident about in a playoff series. Obviously, he's hot or cold, but so is Karis LeVert. This gives the Mavericks the opportunity to save some money in the long run, and the Cavs get an upgrade in a guy who could shoot the lights out of the basketball. Jared Vanderbilt traded to the Indiana Pacers. It's funny because if you were to like run a poll on Twitter and ask like, who do you think is one of the most underrated players in basketball? I feel like most people would say Jared Vanderbilt. Like that would be a popular answer. And I'm not gonna lie, I think that shit is like fake woke. Like that, like it's like fake, like, oh, I know ball, Jared Vanderbilt. I think he's actually become a little bit, I don't want to say overrated, but I don't think he's really that underrated. Like his defense has not been very good this year. He gambles way too much for the Jazz, and it leads to defensive breakdowns a lot. And he's like a brick. He rebounds really, really well, but his shooting is an issue. But he was tremendous defensively for the Timberwolves. It just hasn't really translated on the Jazz. And that's not to say that he's like never going to be a good defender again. It's definitely possible. And Indiana is in need of a young 4 that they could plug alongside Miles Turner. It's like rumored that they're interested in Obi Toppin. Like Jared Vanderbilt, I think makes a lot of sense. Again, need and means. Do they need this player? The Pacers need a young 4 that can play alongside Miles Turner, who they just signed long term. Yes, and they have the means. Yes, they have 3 picks in this upcoming draft. I can't imagine they want to use all of them, so I'm sure that they're very much willing to part with the first round pick in the upcoming draft. I also have Chris Duarte here, who they're rumored to be shopping. A young guy, right? He was all second team, all rookie last year. Some potential there. Maybe the Jazz are interested in that. I'm not so sure. But I like this pickup for the Pacers. Like you get a guy who you can plug alongside Miles Turner. I think he would fit really well alongside Miles Turner. A good rebounder, right? And a guy who, hey, maybe his 3-point shot develops. You have this young dude that you can pair alongside your other young dudes. This is the type of trade Indiana needs to be looking towards. This is the type of shit Indiana needs to be doing. I like this trade a lot for him. I think Jared Vanderbilt gets moved. This is the place I see him going. Oh, remember, I'm putting myself in the brain of Mavericks front office. You can't think about smart decisions. You can't think about, okay, like they need this, this, and this. We do this, this, and this. It has to be, okay, fuck, what's some panic moves? I think they're probably panicking about the Christian Wood situation, especially considering how the Jalen Brunson situation went. Christian Wood is an impending free agent. You can't really risk losing him for nothing, although you didn't give up really that much to get him. So I could see them shopping him this season. And the Nets kind of make some sense, right? They need some front court depth. They need a guy who could space the floor a little bit, playing alongside Claxton, or playing alongside Ben Simmons, or playing off of KD and Kyrie. Another guy who could space the floor and shoot the basketball and create for himself would be great for the Nets. And they get that in the form of Christian Wood. The Mavericks in turn get Patty Mills, Joe Harris, and Day'Ron Sharpe. Not a fun return in a trade package, but it's hard to find a Christian Wood suitor. Like it just is. It makes me think like the Mavericks might eventually just end up keeping him and letting the shit ride out, which would probably be the smart play. But if they were to panic, maybe they go to the Christian Wood's agent and they say, hey, let's do this contract extension, and Wood's agent's like, nah. I could see some type of panic move coming to fruition, and this is the type of shit I could see it being. Now I added Davis Bertans into this package right here because I feel like in order to make contracts work in this trade, like Joe Harris has to be included. And if the Mavericks are bringing on Joe Harris's contract, I feel like they should at least be trying to get off of Bertans' contract as well in the process. And since the Nets are getting by far the best player in this package, they take on the Bertans contract, and the Mavs get, I have 1 second listed, but I'm sure they could finagle 2 seconds out of this. This is not a fun trade. This is not a good trade for the Mavericks. I'm just putting myself in the brain of a front office that has not done good. That has not done good things, that has made panic moves in the last half decade or so. So this is some type of move I could see happening. I do not want it to happen. Let me make myself very fucking clear. I do not want this trade to happen from a Mavericks perspective, but it seems like something they would do. It just does. It gets you off the Bertans contract, which even though it's not guaranteed in the third year, you still have to pay some of it. Joe Harris has 2 years left. Patty Mills 2 years left. Day'Ron Sharpe is a young guy who can rebound the hell out of the basketball. So hey, that's something you need. So maybe that's a thought process here. I don't know. I don't like this, but man, it's just a sinking feeling in my stomach that something's going on with Christian Wood, and that he might have played his last game as a Dallas Maverick. Like, I don't know why I'm thinking that. Boom, the John Collins trade, the Jay Crowder trade. There's been a lot of reports. The Jay Crowder shit is so weird. Like, the negotiations are literally happening on fucking Twitter. You see every proposal and counter proposal for the Hawks, for the Bucks, and the Suns on Twitter. What about a trade like this? Now, let me preface this trade by saying I do not know what John Collins' value is. It seems like nobody who talks about the league knows what John Collins' value is. There was those reports that the Hawks wanted a Rudy Gobert, a Donovan Mitchell return for John Collins. That sounds to me like there was a time when the Cleveland Browns, this was like 5 years ago, the Cleveland Browns were in need of a head coach. And it came out that the Cleveland Browns were going to interview Condoleezza Rice as their head coach. And everyone was like, what the fuck? I think it eventually came out later that was kind of a tactic by the Browns to figure out who was leaking shit in their organization. The reports that they wanted a Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert return for John Collins, that sounds like that. That sounds like they're trying to get the rats out of the building. I just can't imagine John Collins has that much value. That is not a good contract long-term. There's injury concerns long-term, and the production has just not really been there. So for the Hawks, you get off of the John Collins money, and you get in return Grayson Allen and Landry Shaman. Now, when I was doing research for this, I forgot that there was a Grayson Allen Trae Young event and that Atlanta Hawks fans hate Grayson Allen because of that. But that's not really fair to Grayson Allen because every fucking fan base hates him. So I can't look too much into that. Landry Shaman's been traded a trillion times. Like, there's obviously something GMC in him. He can shoot a little bit, some creation. I've never thought he was a good player, but they get two guys who in theory could shoot, and Grayson Allen and Landry Shamet, which is something they need, is shooting. The Bucks finally get Jay Crowder, right? This feels like it's definitely going to happen at some point. They seem very motivated to get Jay Crowder. They're having meetings with him. When have you heard about this? Jay Crowder, who is on contract with another team, having meetings with other teams and trades. Jay fucking Crowder. The player empowerment era has gone too far, and the Suns get an athletic 4 that they could use alongside Ayton in the starting lineup. Cam Johnson is an injury risk. He's hurt a lot. This gives you injury protection for Cam Johnson. It gives you a guy who's a really, really strong bench player. And you just look at it contractually. This doesn't kill you. Like, you don't give up any picks or anything like that. You could still make a big all-in move in the summer if that's what you're interested in. In fact, I have them making a decent move here in a bit. But I think this could be interesting for the Suns. I don't know. I feel like the Hawks fans are probably the most upset about this. But it's just, what is John Collins' value? We do not know. That's the question. Like, if they're trying to get off John Collins, I can't imagine teams are like dying to give up picks for him. I just can't. This one was off the deep end. I have to be honest with you. I was getting a little bit bored. This one is a little bit off the deep end. The Clippers are in the market for a point guard. What makes me think Kyle Lowry is a legit target? Because Kyle Lowry's name was brought up, and I saw a lot of Clippers fans be like, oh, no. The fact that it was reported that Kawhi Leonard expressed to the Clippers front office that he wants a point guard, and the names listed were Kyle Lowry and Fred VanVleet. This front office would fucking bend over backwards for Kawhi Leonard. I believe that 100%. So if Kyle Lowry's a name that gets brought up, he's somebody that they're going to look at. And there's actually a trade that makes some sense here. Right? Kyle Lowry has not been good for the Miami Heat this season. He's getting a lot of money over the next 2 years. In return, the Clippers are able to get off of John Wall, who also has not been good at all. Marcus Morris, who, like, Clippers fans do not like this guy. They need to upgrade from this guy. But the problem is Ty Lue loves the shit out of him. So I don't know if this is a trade they would make, but it gives the Heat a 4. Like, they can plug Marcus Morris into their starting power forward spot. Obviously, Markieff Morris was there a year ago. Was that a year ago? Was he on the Heat whenever the Jokic shit happened? Or was that the Nets? Or is he on the Nets now? I can't keep up with the Morris brothers. And they also get off Reggie Jackson, who also has not been good this year. I feel like the Heat probably say no to this, but I also don't think the Clippers fans would be all that happy about that. I also have them getting Dwayne Dedmon in this scenario. They need a backup big. Dwayne Dedmon's not been good this year either. I don't know. This was an interesting trade offer. I'm just putting some stock into, hey, Kawhi Leonard said he wanted Kyle Lowry or Fred VanVleet. Okay, well, do the Clippers have the stuff to get Fred VanVleet? I don't know. Kyle Lowry? Yeah, they can make something like this work. You're trading overpaid mid for overpaid mid. We see trades like this happen from time to time. And I will say this, though. Kyle Lowry could legitimately help the Clippers in a playoff setting, man. Like, Terrence Mann's been pretty good. But having a guy who's been there, having a guy who's played alongside Kawhi, having a guy who's won a championship as a starting point guard, and a very, very big piece on the team, although that feels like 20 years ago, I don't know. And Marcus Morris is a guy that he could plug in. This trade feels gross, but it's funny enough to me. I'm rocking with it. This is funny to me. This is the trade that popped into my... I wrote like most of the script for this video yesterday, but this morning I threw this trade in the mix because, I think this is perfect. Bones Highland is being shopped. I don't know what's going on. there might be some stuff behind the scenes that we don't know because this just feels very sudden and weird. I know Bones Highland has not been good this year. Defensively, he's terrible. So for a playoff team, like, is he really a guy you want to have regular minutes going towards in a playoff setting? I'm not so sure, right? But this, like, Bones Highland for Naz Reid talk that's going on, I don't like that at all for the Nuggets. Like, I think Naz Reid's cool as an offensive center. I might have already talked about this. I don't know. I think Naz Reid's cool as an offensive center, but, like, in a winning playoff environment, I think he lacks a lot of things that you look for in that type of environment. In this scenario, the Nuggets trade Bones Highland and a 2029 first, that's the only first-round pick they can play with, to the Bulls. Right? It's reported that the Bulls want 2 first-round picks for Alex Caruso. They get a 2029 one, and that's far enough into the future that, like, who knows what the fuck's going to happen between now and then. That could end up being a really, really valuable pick at some point. And you also get Bones Highland, who was an all-rookie guy a year ago, right? Essentially close to being a first-round pick. Like, if you were to say, hey, you get Bones Highland with, like, the 28th pick in next year's draft, you would feel pretty good about that. Like, a player like that, you would feel all right about it. I think the Bulls would consider this. I think the Nuggets, like, if they're really, really trying to maximize this year, and they're like, this is our year, we have to win, we have to go all in, this is a move that they 1,000% would be happy with. Bulls, I think they would be okay with it. Like, Caruso's an amazing defensive player, but offensively, he lacks quite a bit. So I don't know if his market's going to be super huge, and this feels like a pretty decent return for him, all things considered. Here's a big one. The Suns get Jordan Clarkson. They need some creators, right? And in a scenario earlier, I had them trading Landry Shamet, so they need a guy who could come in, fill in, and be the backup to Devin Booker. Jordan Clarkson comes in, a knockdown shooter, a guy who you can give the ball to in clutch situations and you feel good about it. The Suns have been needing a shot creator for years, for like 2 years plus. They've been needing a guy like this. They get it this year with Jordan Clarkson. They trade Dario Saric and Josh Okogie to make contracts work and 2 first-round picks. This makes some sense to me. For the Jazz, you would like to keep Jordan Clarkson. Jordan Clarkson said all the right things. Sounds like he does legitimately want to stay in Utah, but he is a free agent in the summer. So you get a chance to get some draft capital in return. The Suns get somebody they can plug in immediately and make a huge impact on their team and help them in the postseason. Because the Suns, like, it's been bad since Booker went down, but he's going to be back soon, and they're going to go back to being a really good team. And Jordan Clarkson off the bench would be absolutely huge for them. And again, they have first-round picks to play around with. They have the need and the means to make something like this happen. A trade deadline where they get John Collins and Jordan Clarkson without really giving up that much in the way of talent, like talent helping them currently, that would be massive. I mean, they would be right back in the mix as far as Western Conference contenders go, because I think they've kind of been slept on. But if they get booked back soon and they have a trade deadline like this with a brand new owner, that would be crazy. And I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that they're, like, super active at the trade deadline. Hey guys, I'm interjecting into my own video because I wanted to add a new trade. It really kind of sounds like OG might be on the move. I didn't have him in my trade video originally because I just didn't think a trade made sense, and he's under contract next season, so the Raptors didn't really have to move him now. They could weigh their options in the offseason, but now it really sounds like he's going to be on the move. So I decided to throw him in, and this is what I came up with. It's interesting because OG's market's obviously going to be incredibly robust. I think there's teams that there's already been rumors of teams willing to offer 3 first-round picks, but I think the Blazers are desperate enough to make something happen around Dame. Obviously, Dame's getting older. He's been really good this season, and defensively they've been terrible. And OG is a really, really nice fit for them. And the trade that I have is Anthony Simons, who I don't think could win alongside Dame. Like we've already seen this for the Trailblazers. The CJ McCollum, Damian Lillard era never worked out. Anthony Simons is the same way. He's horrible defensively and honestly he's had some really great moments, but has really not been that great this year. So getting rid of him and losing him in this trade, I don't think it really matters that much for the Trailblazers. And I think it's an interesting young player under contract for the Raptors for them to consider, especially if they do end up losing like Fred VanVleet and Gary Trent Jr. They also get Keon Johnson, who's a young guy as well in this, and 2 future first-round picks. I think the Trailblazers would need to call the Bulls to get protections on the 2023 first-round pick removed, and I'm sure that they can make that happen if they really wanted to. So I have the Trailblazers getting OG Anunoby. If it goes down, it would be crazy. This was like a last-second thing for me. I was like, fuck, I need to have OG in this video because I actually do think he gets traded at this point. And yeah, OG goes to the Trailblazers, and the Raptors just completely and totally blow it all up, which nobody expected heading into the season, I don't think. And the final trade that I have, it is the biggest one on the list. That is Fred VanVleet and Gary Trent Jr. to the Lakers for Russell Westbrook. I threw in Austin Reeves because I don't know if the Lakers would have to give up more in this scenario. I'm not so sure. Like Gary Trent and Fred VanVleet's value, I'm unsure about. I really am. but the Raptors are getting 2029 first and 2027 first as well. This trade, two of the most talked about, two of the most sought after draft picks in recent memory. How do the Raptors do this? Fred VanVleet's a free agent in the summer. Gary Trent Jr. is a free agent in the summer. You're going nowhere fast. Both of these guys are clutch clients. Fred VanVleet just became a clutch client. So I'm concerned about that. If I was really interested in keeping these guys, I'm concerned about that, to be 100% honest with you. You don't have to worry about paying them. Fred VanVleet wants $30 million a year. You don't have to worry about paying that. You get two, what could eventually be two very high valuable picks down the line. And for the Lakers, like, this is a no-brainer, right? Fred VanVleet and Gary Trent, two guys who help out tremendously immediately, two guys who, let's just assume, right, you're able to keep in the offseason. Now, not only are you really bolstering your chances of making a run this year, but next year you're looking pretty good too, because you have Fred VanVleet, Gary Trent, LeBron, and AD. That's just a solid four persons. And Rui Hachimura, like, you're looking pretty good as a team heading into next season as well, without having to worry about free agency playing out. Like, you can do your free agency period right now. Get it out of the way. And you also get off of Russ. And it's just like, Russ has been pretty solid as a six man, but it just feels like, I don't know, it feels like there's a disconnect. I don't want to psychoanalyze or anything, but the whole, like, LeBron is, you know, acting like he just lost game 7 of the finals after every game, and Russ, you know, walking off the court smiling and laughing. Feels like there's like a weird disconnect going on, and it was just like, it's just time to end it. Like, that's just what it feels like. Does Russ even play a game for Toronto? That's a question you have to ask. I don't know. This feels like, I don't know, this feels like it makes so much sense for both sides that it almost seems like it makes too much sense. Like, this trade wouldn't happen because it's just like, you look at it, and, you know, we're dumbass fans. We don't understand the inner workings of front offices. But it's like, okay, Lakers get 2 areas of needs. The Raptors get to tank for the rest of the season and get future assets for guys who might be leaving in the summer anyways. Seems like a win-win trade for everybody involved. I do want to throw out that I had a trade that I X'd before this video started, and that was Bojan Bogdanovic going to Memphis for Danny Green, whatever other salary you needed to make it happen, and a first-round pick. The reason why I X'd this out was, one, the contracts, it's hard for the Grizzlies to make a trade. Like, I don't have them making a move. It's just very difficult with their contract situation to find salaries that match and that make sense. And also, there's reports that have been coming out that, like, Bojan's been talking with the front office about future plans of free agency. That to me says, oh, his ass is not getting traded. Other guys like Nerlens Noel feels like a buyout candidate to me. Terrence Ross, buyout candidate. Gary Harris very possibly gets traded. Javonte Green very likely gets traded. Malik Beasley is a guy who probably gets traded. I just couldn't figure out, you know, where. I don't know. I'm just hoping I get one of these right. Like, Fred VanVleet to the Lakers. Like, I'd be happy with myself if I got that right. Jordan Clarkson to the Suns. That would be a sick move for them. That would be a good move for Phoenix. They should definitely consider that. Alex Caruso to the Nuggets. Like, that solidifies them. They're already an inner circle championship contender. That makes them easily the best team in the West. Like, that really does a lot for them. Kyle Lowry to the Clippers and Marcus Morris to the Heat. That would just be a funny trade. That would just be like one of these, wow, what, like, trades that I would actually love to see pan out. Like, that would be hilarious. John Collins to Phoenix in a 3-team trade that sends Jay Crowder to the Bucks. Like, that would be interesting, right? I don't know what the fuck John Collins' value is, and that's what makes this trade really, really weird. But it would make sense for the Suns. And if John Collins' value is in the toilet, it gives the Hawks an opportunity to get off his contract without really getting much in return or having to give up much. Christian Wood to the Nets. Again, this is me putting myself in the mind of a Dallas front office that it feels like does not know what the hell's going on most of the time. Jared Vanderbilt to the Pacers. Need means Pacers. They have both of those things for Jared Vanderbilt. It makes sense. They have the draft capital to make it work, whatever that might entail. This is just a pairing that makes a lot of sense. Tim Hardaway Jr. Karis LeVert swap. Again, this just makes some sense. It's been talked about. It's been rumored. This just makes some sense for both sides. Josh Hart to the Blazers. Really, really strong rotational piece they can add to an already great roster without really having to give up much. Meanwhile, the Blazers get some interesting talent in return. Dougie McBuckets, Josh Richardson to the Knicks. Evan Fournier, a pick, and Cam Reddish to the Spurs. Don't feel too confident about this one. Just don't know where the hell Cam Reddish ends up. And this kind of made some sense to me as a place where the Knicks can also get off of Fournier's deal. Alec Burks to the Pelicans. I like this trade a lot for New Orleans. It would make a ton of sense. Also a guy who's under contract still for next season. So something you won't have to worry about heading into the offseason. You have a really solid depth piece, a really solid bench player who could shoot, defend, create for himself. Love this deal. Slumdog Trillionaire to the Nuggets. Make it happen. Let's reunite it. Reggie Bullock and JaVale McGee to the Sacramento Kings for Rashawn Holmes and Terrence Davis. Again, just putting myself in the head of Dallas Mavericks front office. Rashawn Holmes is a guy that they wanted. years ago, so it just makes sense. Circling the wagons. This is just how it always goes. Drummond back to Philadelphia, and Goga Bitadze to the Celtics. I still can't believe, like, what the fuck is that Goga one? I don't know what I was really in my bag. At least I really thought I was in my bag. That's my predictions for the trade deadline. That's where I think every team stands heading into the deadline, and how I think the deadline shapes up for every single team. This was a long video. I spent way too much time on this video. Probably not worth it whatsoever. But if you guys did enjoy it, leave a like, comment what you guys think is going to happen in the trade deadline. Subscribe if you're not subscribed. Share it. You know, do all of the above things. Use code SLIGHTLY when signing up for Prize Picks. And make sure you guys stay tuned. During the trade deadline day, we will be live for most of the day. We were live last year. I weirdly predicted the Spencer Dinwiddie trade. I also weirdly predicted the Christian Wood trade for the Mavericks. Both of those trades happened while I was streaming. Very weird occurrence. So make sure you guys come by during the trade deadline stream. I just will trades into existence. I don't know what it is. I was also live when the Donovan Mitchell trade happened. So make sure you guys come. Thank you guys for watching. I'll talk to you guys later. I never actually do real outros, so this is weird. Bye.